El día de hoy platicaremos con Megan Carpenter y Mickey Minhaus sobre Franklin Pierce School of Law. Nos hablarán un poco sobre los programas que tienen y sobre su interés de tener estudiantes mexicanos.
La verdad, muy interesante la plática porque nos van a dar una alternativa para que estudiantes mexicanos o abogados ya titulados mexicanos tengan la posibilidad de obtener un grado en Estados Unidos. No se lo pierdan.
Megan Carpenter is Dean of Franklin Pierce School of Law at the University of New Hampshire, which has been a top 10 school in intellectual property for over 3 decades. She is an internationally recognized thought leader in intellectual property, technology, and education. Her track record includes significant accomplishments in innovation and program building. Carpenter writes in the area of intellectual property and innovation. She has published books and law journals and is frequent author and speaker in popular media, including the New York Times, NPR, IAM, Chicago Tribune, Salon, and the Smithsonian Magazine. Before entering academia, Dear Carpenter practiced law at Kirkpatrick and Lockhart, now Key and L. Gates. Mickey Minhaus is the Director of Intellectual Property Program for the Franklin Pierce School of Law at the University of New Hampshire. In addition, Mr. Minhaus is a Senior Vice President for Marconi, an independent organization focused on transforming the fundamentals of patent licensing through providing better solutions for sharing patent technology. Mr. Minhaus joined both Franklin Pierce and Marconi from Microsoft, where he was Chief Patent Counsel, leading the Microsoft Patent Group for 8 years. In addition to outbound and inbound intellectual property licensing, patent strategy, acquisition, and diversities, he also managed patent preparation and prosecution and was responsible for Microsoft conflicts, indemnification, and pre-litigation practice. Before Microsoft, Mr. Minhaus was Vice President of Patent Strategy at Qualcomm in San Diego, California, developing patent and licensing strategies for the multi-billion-dollar patent licensing program. Mr. Minhaus holds a BS in Electrical Engineering from Marquette University, an MS in Electrical Engineering from George Washington University, and a JD and LLM from Franklin Pierce.
Bienvenidos a otra edición de Abogacía Trabajando, hablando con propiedad intelectual. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. El día de hoy tenemos dos invitados muy especiales porque van a platicar acerca de Franklin Pierce Law School. Nos van a explicar ellos de qué se trata, qué proyectos y qué ofertas educativas tienen, pero nos da mucho gusto tener dos invitados de talla internacional y welcome, bienvenidos. Nos gustaría hacer la entrevista en español, pero bueno, lamentablemente no podemos hacer toda la conversación en español. La siguiente entrevista seguramente ya la tendremos lista para hablar en español. So welcome, very nice to have you here.
Muchas gracias por invitarnos. Es un honor y placer.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very glad to have both of you. I was actually the last Mexican student that went to Franklin Pierce. So this is like kind of a dream come true that have both of you here. So to start a conversation, tell us more about Franklin Pierce School of Law, the history of the school, and its place in the IP world.
Wonderful. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm really excited
I'm not ready, but
to be here to talk with you a little bit about Franklin Pierce today. We were founded in the early 1970s to be the law school that is focused on the information age in the United States. And this was long before people were really even using the phrase intellectual property. Franklin Pierce was really founded to educate the IP leaders of tomorrow. So we've been doing that now for almost 50 years, and the United States has been ranking intellectual property programs for a little over 30 years, and we've been ranked consistently in the top 10 nationwide every year since they started the ranking. So it's something that has been a really core focus of ours at the school. And I think I also want to say that throughout the history of the school, one of the things that has been most important has been its focus on practical legal education. We have really, international students have been an enormous part of, what makes the school special. And, on a routine basis, we welcome international attorneys, people at all different sort of levels of experience coming to the school to study and learn. And so, we have really developed this network that reaches around the globe. And we don't just kind of teach people the theoretical parts of law, but but kind of the very practical realities of IP practice around the globe. My colleague Nikki, who leads our IP program, he directs kind of the show there, and he was also part of the school. He graduated
1997.
We're not doing math, don't worry.
A long time ago.
So he has kind of the perspective, not only as an educational leader of the institution, but also having experienced that as a student, much like Arturo.
So you kind of guessed my next question, because this is not the first time you develop an IP program, right? And I would ask, what makes an IP program successful? What are the ingredients? What's the recipe to get a successful program that's both attractive in an academic perspective, but also like from the practitioner's point of view in light of the future?
You know, I remember when the first year I was practicing after law school, I was sitting in my office, and I remember this so clearly because I didn't have any decorations really yet in my office. And I'm just sitting there doing some work. And I thought, you know, I really love this, and I loved law school, but I don't see that the two have anything to do with one another. It seemed like my education that I had in law school was very theoretical. It was reading cases and talking about them, but I didn't learn really much about the practice of law in my own experience. So as I left the practice of law and started teaching and building IP programs at different law schools, I wanted to bridge that gap and to kind of change legal education in that way, and to really integrate the practice with the theory. You know, I think it's really important to think like a lawyer, but I think it's also really important to be able to, you know, put that into some kind of concrete action. So that's something that really has been a hallmark as I've been, you know, at different schools and grown programs. That's something that I've focused on. And frankly, it's also what has drawn me to Franklin Pierce. You know, if you're in the IP practice world, anytime you meet someone who went to Franklin Pierce, somehow it just kind of works into conversation that's, you know, where they got their education, and they really identify with that throughout the arc of their career. I feel like, you know, being here this week in Mexico City and meeting with so many incredible alumni like Arturo, that really comes out more and more, that there's this strong connection, not just while someone's in school, but then, you know, decades later connecting to that network. And so when I was in practice and I would talk to people who went to Franklin Pierce, I thought, okay, we need to be doing, as I'm going to build other programs at schools, we need to be doing what they're doing. How do they, you know, what's the secret? And so I was a long admirer of the school before I arrived, and I do think that practical legal education comes into what makes a successful IP program generally, so that we're thinking about kind of the realities of what students need to have to advance their careers further.
Right, you're not studying the case of 1974.
Yeah.
You're actually studying things that are happening and going on right now.
Yes.
And it makes it indeed more attractive, because it's true. When you get out of law school, and in Mexico, I mean, I got the same feeling when I graduated, and I thought, well, okay, I have my degree, this is great, have a bunch of books, but now you have to start to practice in real life, and no book will have the recipe to solve a case. Mm-hmm. When the first case arrives to your desk, you're like, okay, we never saw that. So you have to kind of figure out how to cope with reality. So I think it's a great element on your program.
Well, thank you. And that's something that, you know, I think is important in an IP program too, to have students that are taught by full-time professors, but also to have students that are being taught by people who have, you know, practices that are active, that are learning, and, you know,
you're there in the battlefield.
You know, absolutely. I mean, Arturo, as we were talking, we've been talking recently about some of the cases that he is working on right now, and to have students learning from people who are engaged at that level of practice, you know, is really meaningful to them in a way that's different. My stories of practice from, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, those aren't even relevant in the IP world anymore. So I think that those kinds of educational experiences are very valuable.
Yeah, and also speaking about like all these practical legal education, I know that your faculty, like they practice, but Mickey Minhas, maybe you can tell us more about your background.
Sure.
What do you do, and just to like to make an example of the kind of faculty that the law school has.
Right, yeah. So I've been in corporate practice for multinational companies for the last 22, 23 years, and I continue to have a practice in the IP licensing space. And so, to use your words, I'm still in the battlefield on a number of issues and director of IP programs. And so that's really helpful to be able to bring to the classroom the real issues that companies and firms are struggling with today, and as well as being able to bring those IP leaders from those companies into the classrooms to discuss what those issues are. Mm-hmm. So we do that every day, every class. When new issues come up, we bring the relevant speakers in and incorporate it into the classroom.
And I guess you play your part while building the IP program, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So just from my corporate practice perspective, I was Chief Patent Counsel at Microsoft for the last 9 years prior to coming here. And it's a worldwide multinational practice, attorneys in 140 countries. And you really recognize how important it is for people to have an educational background, not just in their domestic country, but other countries as well, as there are lots of similarities from country to country, but there's also nuances. There's also differences from country to country that is very helpful to know. And one of the things we brought into our teachings is really taking a multinational approach to it. So it's not just US law, but it's all the major jurisdictions around the world and the nuances that come into play in how companies do business.
And talking about the multinational approach, I also think that something that helps IP program from Franklin Law School is that you have, as you said, students from all over the world. So you get a perspective from different points of view. And also and we were talking about that yesterday, that helps you to, as an alumni, to have a network of students and professionals all over the world for the future, right? And that's a great networking and business development opportunity.
Very much so. And, if I can, I'll tell a little story on how that played out, particularly for Franklin Pierce. So this is in my role at Microsoft. We were in a negotiation with Samsung, and it was a multi-billion-dollar dispute. And we took a team, myself included, over to Seoul, South Korea to have this discussion that we knew was going to be tense and likely to lead into litigation. And in the introductions, as we're introducing one another, and I, as the head of IP for Microsoft, and my counterpart, the head of IP at Samsung, upon introduction, you said, "I think I know you. You were my teaching assistant in contracts back in law school." And we in fact knew each other, sort of lost track of one another, but knew each other back when we were first year law students. And that made, we were able to resolve that issue basically because of the trust that we had inherently between the two of us, merely because we went to the same school together.
Right.
Yeah, and this international perspective, I think is key for like prospective students. So back in my day, I remember that you have like a big library, and I remember just researching there, and I saw a few Mexican authors. So can you tell us more about what's the place of the Library of Franklin Pierce, like in the world? I think it's the largest one for IP or something like that.
Yes, it is the largest academic IP library in the Western Hemisphere. So it is one of the three top research institutions around the world that's focused on intellectual property. And when we think about intellectual property, we're really, thinking beyond patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. We're thinking much more broadly about different areas of whether it's entertainment or fashion or sports or healthcare innovation, biotech. So many things sort of come into IP, but that all kind of comes, is really at the center of our library. And as a result, we have scholars and people who are coming to just spend some time at the school to do research, and so they're part of that kind of constant hub of activity that we see at the law school. You might wander into the library and encounter someone who's writing a paper, while they're on, leave from their job in Korea. And it's just really incredible to see that kind of community come together around research. One of the interesting parts about that we've been discussing right now is that we have so many alumni who are now writing books about IP that we have decided to have, our own special section for alumni.
For graduates.
Yes. And when you see those shelves, it's just, books in all different languages. And you see the reality of this network of, international IP voices all around the globe.
One point I'd like to emphasize on the reality of having graduates from all over the school, and we touched on this in the beginning. There's sort of the substantive part of law school and helping solve problems for your clients, but there's a whole business side of the law that, frankly, isn't emphasized in schools. However, having this worldwide network allows one to really start to build a practice and use that network. And we have lots of alum that work together from one country to the other country, and they work and partner with each other. And it's really helped people from all over the world build their practices through the school's network.
Especially because I think when you send work abroad, or at least that's my experience, you really want to work with someone you trust.
Exactly.
Not because he's or she is ranked in a directory, or if she or he has an award. In my experience, I rather work with someone I know, or at least that we have something in common that makes me believe it's someone worthwhile to trust.
Exactly.
And if you share the same university, the same law school, at the end, it is fair to believe that you share the same values.
Mm-hmm.
You do,
So,
and there's a level of trust of having that practical education. And so, an attorney in one country will send work to an attorney in another country, and then they get reciprocated back, and that happens all the time. And it's really helped people build their practices from the ground up.
Yeah, that's my case as an in-house counsel. Like I have my outside counsel in Ecuador. He's from Franklin Pierce, Byron Roballo. So I met him there, and we developed a good relationship. And then I started like sending work to him in Ecuador. So and I could do the same in other countries like China,
Right.
or like so. That's the reason that it's important for us to go and meet people and develop this network of practicing attorneys. But anyway, going back to the program that you have, can you tell us more about what kind of programs do you have? Do you have programs for IP practitioners or for students from other law schools?
Yes, we have. I would put them into kind of three potential buckets. We have one set of programs that's really focused on a master's degree in intellectual property, also commerce and technology. And those programs are for both lawyers and non-lawyers. We have an LLM that's for lawyers, and then a master's for non-lawyers. And that is really a one-year program, and it's offered both residentially at our campus in New Hampshire, and also online. And people, if they can only come for a semester, then we could do half online, half in person. And students, primarily, I think our student body is comprised of, people from other countries who are coming to kind of develop that network. And I think that was a program that you were a part of.
Yes.
when you were at Franklin Pierce, and so that program has existed. It was one of the first in the country, and has existed for a long time. We also have something that is groundbreaking, and it's something that no other law school in the United States is offering right now, and it is a JD. So that's the law degree that we get in the U.S. And in the U.S. is different from many other countries where, in other places the law degree is an undergraduate degree that you get sort of at university. But in the United States, you go to university first for 4 years, and then it's a professional graduate program. So to get the JD, it's that extra 3 years. We have developed a program where we are able to make the US JD available to people in other countries, and without having them have to uproot their lives and move to the US. Most of the classes are online, but we get together with the students 4 times a year for these really intensive, learning sessions around a long weekend. And we do all kinds of cool things during that period of time. The students develop an incredible bond with one another. But this way, what we have done is really enable working professionals to, you can stay in a law firm, keep your job, stay in your home, stay with your family, and get that U.S. law degree, which could push your career to the next level. Nikki, anything else about that program that you want to add?
I just want to highlight those when we get together physically, right? So most of the time people get to take the classes from the comfort of their home in their home city or their job and continue on with their lives. But when we get together for these 4-day periods, it really is an interesting environment in the sense that one, the students get to meet each other physically, and we've seen the social interaction and the human interaction and how they all get along so terrifically and building a network. But then also the substance that we bring into it, we take advantage of the fact that we're all in person and what we will do. We will have these immersions in different cities, and based on the competence or the area of technology in a given city, we focus a class around that. For example, we had a gathering in Washington, D.C. where we focused on IP policy. We met in Los Angeles and focused on entertainment and media. Our next one is in Dallas, Texas, and we're focusing on patent litigation. The one after that will be in Las Vegas, and we're focusing on gaming and sports.
Okay.
And so we continue to do that. We'll be in New York, we'll be in Seattle talking about the cloud, New York on the fashion industry, and we'll continue to do that, really focus on IP issues. And if there's a theme there, it's when you have an issue, let's call it the fashion issue in New York City, you are bringing in all sorts of intellectual property topics into the space of fashion or the space of sports or whatever the topic might be, whether they're the copyright issues, the trademark issues, the patent issues, the privacy issues, the antitrust issues, and so on. And that way, students really get firsthand knowledge of what the companies in that area are struggling with respect to all those intellectual property issues.
I'm sorry, just talking about the JD that you're explaining to us, it is mainly focused on IP matters, or do you get to see more of the U.S. law?
That's a great question. The degree that you get at the end is the U.S. JD.
Okay.
So you can, it is a general JD, just like that qualifies students to practice law, in any area. But we really do curate it to be focused on intellectual property, technology, and information law. And it's the only U.S. law degree that is specialized in that way. So our intent really is to launch the IP leaders of tomorrow. And increasingly, and I know you see this in your practice, IP is such a global enterprise, and that having that additional kind of credential and that additional education, we think can be helpful to people no matter where they're located and where they're practicing. I'll draw on something that Mickey said about some of these kinds of intensive sessions that we have together. When we get the students together, we can draw on the network that we were talking about. So if we were having a session here in Mexico City, we would be able to draw on the fantastic experience of Arturo to come and talk about his, and then the students are making those connections even while they're in school. So they're not just networking with people that are their colleagues while they're in school, but they're also connecting right away to that kind of broader Franklin Pierce network that does all of the things we've been talking about over the last few minutes. And so I think one of the things we've realized is that there are some great things you can do online. And our online classes it's not like a talking head video that people are listening to. They're very interactive, and there are quizzes and knowledge, it's really, it's very engaging. But when we get together, let's do things in person that you can only really do in person. And I think this program is a perfect combination of the two.
How long does it take to get your JD? That's, I think, an important question.
Yeah, it's designed to be 3.5 years. It runs year round. We also recognize the realities of people's working lives and practices. So sometimes we've had students speed up and finish earlier. And then we've had students who, have slowed down for a semester, when something gets busy. So it enables the flexibility to, let school work around your life and
Right.
not having to give up your life to be in school.
I think that's awesome because you don't have to leave your work
Right.
to study. And as you mentioned before, you need to pay your bills still. You have a house, you have a
Exactly.
family. So it's good that you are able to do this online and you have to only go to the US like 4 times a year, right?
Exactly. I mean, when I went to school 25 years ago, I had to quit my job, physically move, no income for the 3-year period.
I did the
and
same.
so on, right? But there were 2 engineers that worked for me at Microsoft that were part of the inaugural program, the first year of this program, and they were continuing to work at Microsoft, and they were taking the classes from their desks after work, and in the amount of time it would have taken them to commute to go to a Seattle area law school, they were taking the class right then and there and being done with it. So they've been very satisfied with it.
And right, it's an opportunity because sometimes, I mean, life gets more complicated as you get older, and as you say, we all have bills to pay and we have families. And I've thought about it many times. Like, I would have liked to study abroad, but I figure my reality nowadays, I think my family would not be very keen to move to the US right now. But it's the opportunity to do something I really wanted to do and do it from the comfort of my home or at my office, right? So, but I know we still have another offer, educational offer to talk about still. Time is running out.
We can wrap it up.
Let's wrap up. Would you like to say something regarding this first part of the questions we have addressed?
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit about the IP Summer Institute.
We should, yeah.
So let's go.
So we have, for over 30 years, have had the IP Summer Institute, and there has been focused intellectual property classes over a shortened period in the summertime. And so we have some classes that are online that are 3 to 6 weeks long, and then we have other classes that are in person and that are 2 weeks long in Concord, New Hampshire, which is a beautiful place in the summertime to visit.
Mickey, I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
We'll get back to that because
Yes.
I think it's very interesting and I don't want to rush you to have it
Okay.
done in 1 minute.
Sure.
But, vamos a continuar en una siguiente edición de este programa con las ofertas educativas que tiene Franklin Pierce. Creo que es algo muy interesante para nuestra audiencia porque, como hemos platicado, da la opción de hacer una maestría, obtener un JD y desde la comodidad de su hogar. Pero bueno, vamos a platicar un poquito más de eso en la siguiente edición. Muchas gracias. Creo que hay información muy valiosa la que nos compartieron nuestros invitados acerca de la oferta educativa de Franklin Pierce Law School, y en la siguiente edición podremos abundar un poco más acerca de las cuestiones prácticas de acceder a estos programas, ¿no?
No se lo pierdan y sigan nuestras redes sociales.